Welcome back to English in Fluency. I am so happy you are here with me today. Take a moment right now, just where you are, to pause. Maybe you are walking outside, feeling the air on your face, or maybe you are sitting in a comfortable chair with a warm cup of coffee or tea. Wherever you are, I want you to let this episode be a gentle break in your day. A special time just for you to breathe, to think, and to reconnect with who you really are, deep down inside. Today, we are going to talk about something incredibly powerful, something that affects every single one of us, no matter where we come from, what language we speak, or what our background is. We are going to talk about the topic of identity shifting, specifically how to release your old identities. When I talk about old identities, I mean the labels and the roles that we carry with us like heavy backpacks, sometimes for years and years, without even realizing we are carrying them. These are the ideas that you have about yourself that come from the past, from a version of you that does not exist anymore. These identities often start very early in our lives, sometimes when we were just children. They can come from school. Imagine a teacher once told you that you were the quiet kid, and you believed them. You accepted that label as the truth. Sometimes these identities come from our families. Maybe you were always seen as the responsible one, or the funny one, or the one who gets into trouble. And sometimes these identities come from specific experiences, moments when something did not go the way you wanted, so you decided, I am not good at this, or this is not who I am. Over time, these labels become part of our story. They become part of the script we read from every day, even if they are no longer true. It is exactly like wearing clothes that used to fit you perfectly when you were younger. But now they are too small and uncomfortable, yet you keep wearing them because you are used to them. You forget that you can take them off and put on something new. Think about some examples you might recognize in your own life or in the lives of people around you. Maybe you grew up believing that you were the kind of person who never takes risks. So now, as an adult, you avoid new opportunities even if they could help you grow or bring you happiness. Maybe you always thought of yourself as a perfectionist, so you feel a huge pressure to do everything perfectly, even when it is not necessary, which causes you so much stress. Or maybe you were told you were the quiet one, so you never practiced speaking up, including when you are trying to speak English. These identities might have been true for one specific moment in your life, but that moment has passed. And yet, the identity stayed. That is the strange and difficult thing about old identities. They follow us around like shadows, even when we do not need them anymore. In this episode, we are going to explore what life could look like if you let go of those old identities, the ones that limit you or hold you back. Please understand that this is not about changing who you are in your essence. It is not about becoming a completely different person overnight. It is about giving yourself permission to grow, to expand, and to become someone new when the time is right. And maybe, just maybe, that time is right now. So, let me start with a soft question. A question that can open a door inside your mind if you let it. When was the last time you surprised yourself? Think about it for a moment. Maybe it was a moment when you spoke English more confidently than you expected. Maybe you were in a conversation and the words just flowed out without fear. Maybe it was a moment when you said yes to something that usually scares you. Or maybe it was a moment when you realized that you are stronger, wiser, or more capable than you believed. These moments are not accidents. They are not luck. They are small signs that your identity is already changing, that you are not the same person you were 5 or 10 years ago. Today on English in Fluency, let us take a gentle journey together. Let us look at the stories you tell about who you are. Let us question the ones that no longer serve you. And let us imagine who you could become if you allowed yourself to release the old identities that keep you small. This is going to be calm, reflective, and maybe even a little transformative. So, take a deep breath in, hold it for a second, and let it out slowly. Settle in, and let us begin. To understand how to shift our identity, we first need to understand what old identities are and how they form. When we talk about old identities, we are really talking about the stories we learned to believe about ourselves a long time ago. These stories usually begin in childhood, when we are still trying to understand who we are and how the world works. As children, we are like sponges. We pick up information from everywhere. We listen to our parents, our teachers, our classmates, and even to small comments people make without thinking. Over time, these comments start to shape how we see ourselves. If a teacher says, "You are such a quiet student," you might begin to believe that being quiet is part of your personality, like the color of your eyes. If your family always tells you that you are the responsible one, you might feel pressure to always act strong and mature, even when you feel like crying or being silly inside. Many of these identities come from school, because school is often the first place where we are compared to others. Maybe you were told you were bad at math after getting one low score, or that you were not creative because someone did not like your drawing. Maybe you were called talkative, lazy, shy, or sensitive. Even simple labels can stick to us like glue for years. The truth is, children do not question these labels. They trust the adults. They accept them. And once we accept an identity, it starts to shape our decisions. If you believe you are shy, you will avoid situations where you need to speak. If you believe you are bad at something, you will not try again. That identity feels safe, even when it is holding you back. Family expectations also play a huge role in this process. In many families, each person unconsciously receives a role. The smart one, the calm one, the troublemaker, the emotional one, the leader, the helper. Sometimes these roles are positive, and sometimes they make life much more difficult. A parent might say, "You are always so careful," and suddenly you grow up afraid to take risks. Another parent might say, "You are the strong one," so you feel guilty showing weakness later in life. These expectations can follow you well into adulthood, long after you have left your childhood home, even when your life has changed completely. Old identities can also form from past experiences, especially painful or embarrassing ones. Let me share a simple story with you. For many years, I had a friend named Elena who believed she was terrible at public speaking. And the funny thing is, this belief came from just one moment in school when she was 12 years old. I remember her telling me about standing in front of the class, reading from a paper. Suddenly, her voice started shaking. A few students laughed quietly in the back. She felt her face turn red and her hands start sweating. In that moment, she decided, "I am bad at speaking in front of people." That one moment created an identity that stayed with her for 20 years. Every time she had to speak at a meeting or introduce herself, she remembered that feeling. She did not question it. She did not ask herself if it was still true. She simply accepted the identity and carried it like a heavy bag on her back. This is the interesting and powerful thing about old identities. They feel true. They feel real. They feel like facts, not just opinions. But many of them are outdated. They are like old software running on a modern computer. They come from a version of you that no longer exists. The person you are today is wiser, stronger, more experienced, and more aware. Yet, the identities from your past continue to influence your present. They shape your decisions, your confidence, your relationships, and even your dreams. What makes old identities powerful is that they operate quietly. We do not usually say, "I am choosing this because of my old identity." Instead, the identity just whispers in the background. It tells you, "Do not try, do not speak, do not take risks. This is not who you are." And because the voice feels familiar, we listen to it without questioning. Before we can release an old identity, we first need to understand where it comes from. When you look back at your childhood, your family, your school experiences, and the moments that shaped you, you start to see how these identities were created. And when you understand their origins, something amazing happens. You begin to realize that old identities are not destiny. They are not permanent. They are simply stories. And stories can be rewritten, updated, or completely replaced. Let's look closer at where our identities come from. When we look closely at our identities, we often discover something surprising. Most of them were not created by us. They were shaped by the people around us, by the environments we grew up in, and by experiences we had at a time when we did not fully understand ourselves. Identity is not something that appears suddenly. It grows slowly, like a plant. And just like a plant takes the shape of the pot it grows in, our identity takes the shape of our childhood, our culture, our family expectations, and the experiences that left a strong emotional mark on us. Think back to your childhood for a moment. Children are like open books. They listen, they observe, and they absorb everything around them. If a child hears, "You are not very creative," they might believe it without question. If a teacher says, "You are not good at languages," that child may carry the belief into adulthood, even when it is no longer true. Ask yourself, who told you that you are not creative? Was it a teacher, a parent, or maybe a classmate who did not understand you? And even more importantly, where did that belief come from? Is it based on one moment, one comment, or one mistake? Family plays a huge role in shaping identity, as we mentioned, but let us go deeper. Families often give us roles, not because they want to limit us, but because it helps them understand the world. For example, take the story of Marcus. Marcus was the youngest of three brothers. His oldest brother was the athlete, and the middle brother was the artist. Marcus was quiet, so his family labeled him the responsible one. He was the one who always did his homework, who never caused trouble. His family praised him for this. "We can always count on Marcus," they would say. He liked this feeling of being reliable. But as he grew up, this identity became a trap. He felt he could not take risks in his career because he had to be the responsible one. He felt he could not travel or explore the world because responsible people do not just leave everything behind. He was trapped by a label given to him when he was 5 years old. You may have had a similar experience. Maybe you were the child who got good grades, so everyone expected you to always succeed, and now you feel like a failure whenever you make a simple mistake. In many families, these roles become fixed. They turn into invisible rules that follow you as you grow up. And without noticing, you start living according to them. You might take care of everyone else before yourself because that was your childhood role. You might avoid speaking up because it did not fit your family identity. Culture adds another layer to this. Every culture has expectations: how you should behave, what personality traits are valued, what success looks like, and what failure means. Some cultures encourage people to speak confidently and share their opinions, while others teach people to be modest, quiet, and listen to authority. None of these are wrong, but they can shape your identity in powerful ways. You may think you are naturally shy, but maybe you grew up in a culture where children were expected to stay quiet and not interrupt adults. You may think you are not a leader, but maybe your society taught you to wait for instructions instead of taking initiative. Then there are past experiences, especially the setbacks that hurt us. A big disappointment, a difficult moment, or a mistake in front of others can create a belief that stays with us for years. If you once tried to speak English and someone laughed or corrected you harshly, maybe you decided, "I am not good at speaking." If you tried something new and failed, maybe you told yourself, "I am not that type of person." These beliefs often remain hidden, deep in our subconscious, but they influence us every day. We forget where they came from, but we continue to live as if they are absolutely true. This is why reflection is so important. When you ask yourself, "Where did this belief come from?" you start to see the story more clearly. Many times, the identity you carry was created by someone else, not by your own choice. Maybe it came from a moment when you were young and did not know any better. Maybe it came from a misunderstanding. Maybe it came from someone who was stressed, tired, or dealing with their own problems. But because you were young and sensitive, you believed their words completely. Imagine how different your life could be if you stopped carrying these old stories. Think about how many decisions you have made because of identities that were shaped by others. How many times have you said no to an opportunity because of something someone told you years ago? How many dreams have you pushed away because of an identity that does not belong to you anymore? When you begin to notice these stories, everything changes. Awareness gives you power. It helps you see that identities are not permanent. They are learned. And if something is learned, it can also be unlearned. This does not mean you must reject your past or blame your family or teachers. It simply means you start choosing which identity fits you today, not the identity that was given to you years ago. In this gentle process, you begin to understand that you are more than the labels you received. You are more than the comments people made. You are more than the roles you played in your family or culture. Your identity is not a prison. It is something you can shape, expand, and rewrite. And that is where real transformation begins. When we hold on to old identities, there is always a hidden cost. It is not a cost we pay with money, but a cost we pay with our confidence, our choices, and sometimes even our happiness. Many people do not realize how much these outdated identities shape their daily life. They think, "This is just who I am," without noticing how much that belief limits them. When you carry an identity that no longer fits you, it feels a bit like wearing shoes that are too tight. At first, you might ignore the discomfort, but after a while, every step becomes painful, and you start avoiding things that require walking. Old identities do the same. They quietly control your movement, your decisions, and even your dreams. Emotionally, old identities create constant self-doubt. If you think of yourself as the shy person, every time you want to speak up, a small voice inside you says, "Careful, that is not who you are. You will embarrass yourself." If you believe you are not good with people, you might avoid making new friends or joining conversations, even if you are lonely. If you think you are not the kind of person who succeeds, you might stop trying altogether. These thoughts do not appear loudly. They appear softly like background noise. But over time, this noise becomes a barrier that stops you from becoming who you want to be. Old identities also feed perfectionism. For example, if you grew up being called the smart one, you might feel pressure to never make mistakes. You might panic when you do not understand something immediately, especially when learning English. You might think, "Smart people should understand this instantly." If you were labeled the responsible one, you may try to do everything perfectly so you do not disappoint anyone. Perfectionism sounds positive, like you are trying to do a good job, but it often causes stress, fear, and burnout. It makes simple tasks feel heavy, and it makes learning new skills like speaking a foreign language much harder because you are always scared of doing it wrong. Another hidden cost is the fear of change. When you believe strongly in an old identity, change feels dangerous. Even if the change is good for you, it feels like stepping into unknown territory. Maybe your identity says, "I am not confident," so you avoid situations that require courage. Maybe it says, "I am not creative," so you avoid trying anything artistic. Maybe it says, "I am not the type of person who travels," so you never explore places you secretly want to see. These fears do not come from reality. They come from the identity you are holding on to. And of course, old identities limit opportunities. Think about how many times you said no to something, not because you did not want to do it, but because you believed you were not the kind of person who could. What opportunities have you said no to because you thought you were not that kind of person? Was it applying for a job, learning a new skill, starting a relationship, speaking up in English, or maybe something as simple as joining a club or a group activity? When you look back, you may realize you were not saying no. Your old identity was saying no for you. These identities also affect our relationships deeply. If you see yourself as the quiet one, people will not hear your real opinions, and they might not truly know you. If you see yourself as the one who always helps, you might let others take advantage of your kindness because you cannot say no. If you see yourself as the difficult one, you might stay silent when you deserve to be treated better, because you think, "Well, this is just how life is for me." Relationships grow when we show our true selves, but outdated identities hide parts of us behind old stories. Perhaps the biggest cost of holding on to old identities is that they stop growth. Human beings are naturally designed to grow, learn, and evolve. You are not the same person you were 5, 10, or 15 years ago. Your experiences, your challenges, your wins, your losses, they all changed you. But if your identity has not changed with you, you can feel stuck. It is like your mind is trying to upgrade, but your identity is running an old version of the software. When I talk about this, many listeners feel a deep recognition. Maybe you felt this too. Maybe you felt that something inside you wants to grow, but another part of you is holding the door closed. This is the hidden cost of an old identity. It keeps you small when life is inviting you to expand. The good news is that the moment you notice this cost, everything begins to shift. Awareness is the first step toward freedom. When you understand what your old identity is doing to you, you can finally decide whether you still want to carry it. And often the answer is no. You deserve a life that matches who you are today, not who you were years ago. Old identities do not only live in your memories, they show up in your everyday life, often in ways you do not even notice. They influence your choices, your reactions, your confidence, and even the opportunities you pay attention to. Many people imagine identity as something abstract or philosophical, but it is actually very practical. It affects how you behave at work, how you speak to friends, how you learn new skills, and even how you dream about your future. When you understand how old identities influence your daily life, you begin to see why releasing them can create such powerful change. One of the clearest examples is the identity of the shy person. Maybe you learned this identity in childhood or school, and now it follows you everywhere. You want to speak English more, but the moment you open your mouth, the old identity whispers, "Do not say anything. What if you make a mistake? What if they do not understand you?" So you stay quiet. You listen. You understand. But you do not speak. Not because you cannot, but because the identity you have been carrying tells you not to try. Many English learners think their problem is lack of vocabulary or grammar, but often the real problem is the identity they believe about themselves. I am shy. That belief stops them from practicing, and without practice, progress becomes slower. The identity becomes a cycle that keeps repeating itself. Another common identity is the overthinker. This person has great ideas and big dreams, but they spend so much time thinking about every detail that they never actually start. Maybe you have experienced this too. You want to begin a project, a new habit, or a new routine, but your mind keeps saying, "What if it does not work? What if I fail? What if people judge me?" Overthinking creates analysis paralysis, a feeling where you think so much that you feel stuck. And because you do not start, you never get the chance to grow. This identity does not protect you. It only keeps you from discovering what you are capable of. Then there is the identity of the always responsible one. Like my friend Marcus. This person is dependable, hardworking, and strong, but often at the cost of their own well-being. They were probably the child who helped everyone, the student who always completed assignments, or the adult who always fixes problems. Now they have grown up believing they must be responsible all the time. They must say yes. They must carry every burden. They must stay strong even when they are tired. This identity sounds positive, but it can be exhausting. It makes it difficult to say no, even when you need rest. It makes it hard to ask for help even when you are struggling. And it can create stress, burnout, or resentment because you are always giving but rarely receiving. A related identity is the people pleaser. Many adults carry this one without noticing it. This person always tries to make others happy, often by ignoring their own needs or desires. If someone asks for help, they say yes, even when they do not have time. If someone wants something different, They agree even when they disagree inside. They avoid conflict, avoid expressing their feelings, and avoid making choices for themselves. People-pleasing comes from wanting love, approval, or peace. But over time, it makes you lose connection with who you really are. You start living for others instead of living for yourself. You might even find yourself speaking English the way you think others want you to speak, rather than in your own true voice. These identities do not only affect personal life, they appear in workplaces too. For example, someone who believes they are not leadership material may never apply for a promotion, even if they have talent and experience. Someone who thinks they are not confident enough may avoid sharing ideas in meetings, even when they have valuable insights. Someone who learned they are not creative may stay silent during brainstorming sessions, even when they have great suggestions. These old identities limit professional growth, reduce opportunities, and create unnecessary stress. Cultural expectations can also shape daily behavior, as we discussed. In some cultures, being quiet is seen as polite, so people grow up thinking that expressing themselves is wrong. In others, showing emotions is considered weak, so adults learn to hide their true feelings. These cultural identities become automatic habits, and while they may have helped you fit in as a child, they may not support the person you want to become. When you look at these examples, you might start recognizing your own patterns. Maybe you have held back when you wanted to speak up. Maybe you stayed in the background when you wanted to step forward. Maybe you avoided trying something new because the identity inside you said, "That is not who you are." But is that true? Or is it just an old story you have been repeating for years? Real change begins when you notice these moments. When you see how your identity influences your actions, you start to understand that many limitations are not real. They are learned, and anything learned can be unlearned. The moment you question your old identity, you open the door to a new way of living. One that is more confident, more aligned, and more honest with who you are today. So, what happens when you release old identities? When you finally release an old identity, something almost magical begins to happen. It does not happen all at once, and it does not feel dramatic like in a movie. Instead, it feels gentle and natural, like opening a window in a room that has not been aired out in years. Suddenly, there is more space. You can breathe more easily. You can see more clearly. And you start to notice possibilities that were always around you, but you could not see them through the old stories you were carrying. One of the first changes you feel is more confidence. It is not the loud, show-off type of confidence. It is a calm, steady feeling inside your chest that whispers, "Maybe I can do this." When you stop calling yourself the shy one, the unlucky one, or the person who always fails, your mind becomes lighter. You no longer feel trapped by labels from your past. You begin to trust yourself more. You start to believe that you can try new things, speak up when needed, and face challenges with more strength than you expected. Confidence grows slowly, but it grows powerfully, especially when you stop repeating the old story. Another big shift is more opportunities. Old identities often act like invisible doors that stay closed. They make you avoid trying, avoid learning, avoid risk. But when you release those identities, the world around you suddenly feels more open. You might notice opportunities you ignored before, a chance to practice English with someone, a new project at work, a hobby you always wanted to try, or even a relationship you were afraid to start. You begin to say yes more often, not because you feel pressure, but because you are no longer held back by a false idea of who you are. Opportunities grow when you grow. You also experience more emotional freedom. Old identities often come with heavy feelings: guilt, fear, perfectionism, and self-doubt. They make you feel like you must act a certain way, even if it does not make you happy. When you let them go, you feel lighter. Your emotions have more room to move. You do not have to hide parts of yourself or pretend to be someone you no longer want to be. This emotional freedom allows you to enjoy the small things more, to relax more easily, and to connect with others without fear of judgment. It is like removing a tight mask you have been wearing for too long. You might also notice that your relationships change when you release old identities. The people around you start to see you differently. Some will be surprised. Some will feel inspired. Some will treat you with more respect. When you stop acting like the helper, the quiet one, or the always responsible one, people begin to understand your real personality. You show your true self more often, and this honesty invites deeper, more meaningful connections. As these changes grow, you start to feel something even more important: the possibility of becoming someone new. You realize that identity is not a fixed object. It is more like clay, something you can shape, reshape, and redesign as you learn and evolve. This gives you a sense of control over your life. Instead of saying, "This is just who I am," you begin to ask, "Who do I want to be next?" That question opens doors inside you that you may not have touched for years. So let me ask you a powerful question right now. Who could you become if you stopped carrying old stories about who you are? What new version of yourself is waiting behind the identity you have been holding on to? Imagine that version clearly. Not the perfect version, but the real, growing version of you. That vision is the beginning of your transformation. Releasing old identities is not just about letting go. It is about making room for the person you are becoming. Confident, open, curious, and ready for new possibilities. Now, let us talk about how to actually do this. Releasing an old identity does not happen in one big moment. It grows through small, simple steps that you practice again and again. You do not need therapy, deep psychology books, or a dramatic life change. You just need awareness, honesty, and a little courage. The first practical step is becoming aware of the labels you have been using to describe yourself. Many people walk around with labels like, "I am shy," "I am bad at English," "I am an overthinker," or "I am not creative." These labels feel normal because you have repeated them for so long. But awareness begins when you pause and ask yourself, "Is this really true? Or is this just a story I learned to repeat?" Once you notice the label, you create a small distance between you and that old identity. You begin to see that a label is not a fact. It is just a habit of thinking. The second step is challenging the old story behind the identity. You can ask yourself simple questions. Where did this story come from? Who told me this? How do I know it is true? For example, if you say, "I am bad at English," maybe the story started years ago in school when you made mistakes and felt embarrassed. But that moment does not define you today. Your mind might still be holding that story, even though you are older, wiser, and more capable. Now, When you challenge old stories, you slowly break their power. You start to understand that the identity you carry is not your destiny. It is just an old memory that stayed for too long. The third step is trying small experiments that go in the opposite direction of your old identity. If you normally stay quiet because you believe you are the shy one, try speaking once in a short conversation. It does not have to be a long speech, just one sentence. If you usually overthink before starting something, try doing it immediately for just 5 minutes. These experiments do not have to be perfect or dramatic. Think of them as gentle tests. You are simply trying on a new version of yourself, like trying on a new outfit to see how it feels. When you allow yourself to experiment without pressure, you open a space for new behavior to grow. And every time you act differently, even in a small way, you send your brain a new message. Maybe I am not who I always thought I was. Another important step is practicing consistency rather than perfection. Many people want to change their identity in one day, but identity does not shift through one perfect action. It shifts through many small, imperfect actions repeated over time. So if you speak up once, celebrate it. And if the next day you stay quiet again, do not punish yourself. Consistency means returning to your intention even after a setback. You can tell yourself, I am learning. I am growing. I will try again tomorrow. This creates a gentle, supportive mindset that keeps you moving forward instead of giving up. When you focus on consistency, change feels more natural and less stressful. Finally, the last step is building a new mindset that supports the identity you want to grow into. A new mindset is not something you force. It is something you practice through small thoughts and small habits. For example, you might repeat phrases like, I am learning to be more confident, or I am improving every day, or I am trying on a new version of myself. These phrases are simple, but they help your mind shift from fixed thinking to flexible thinking. Over time, this mindset becomes your new inner voice, a voice that supports your progress instead of pulling you back to old patterns. All these steps work together: awareness, challenge in old stories, small experiments, consistency, and a new mindset. You do not need to change your whole life overnight. Just start small. Try one new behavior. Do one tiny action that feels different from your old identity. Experiment without pressure. Little by little, you will notice something amazing. The old identity becomes weaker, and the new identity becomes stronger. And one day, almost without realizing it, you find yourself living as a new version of you. Now, I want to take you into a short, gentle reflection. You can think of this as a quiet moment inside the episode, a space where you pause and connect with yourself. If you are in a safe and comfortable place, you may softly close your eyes. If not, you can simply listen and relax your body a little. Let your shoulders drop, let your breath slow down, and let your mind become more calm. This is not meditation in a complicated way. It is simply a moment to breathe, to listen, and to feel. In our busy daily lives, we rarely stop long enough to hear our own thoughts clearly. So, this part of the episode gives you a chance to meet yourself with more honesty and kindness. As you settle into this moment, begin by noticing your breathing. Just notice it. You do not need to change it. Imagine that your breath is gently cleaning your mind like fresh air coming through an open window. Let your thoughts move slowly like clouds crossing the sky. Now ask yourself a soft question. Who do you think you must be? This question helps you see the expectations you have been carrying. sometimes for years. Maybe you feel you must be strong all the time. Maybe you think you must be perfect, or quiet, or responsible, or always available for others. These identities often feel like rules, as if we have no other choice. But in this moment, allow yourself to look at these rules with curiosity. Where did they come from? Are they still true for you? Now, bring your attention to a different question. Who do you want to be? Now imagine you are meeting a new version of yourself, someone who is growing, learning, and becoming more free. This version of you does not need to follow old labels or old beliefs. Maybe you want to be more confident. Maybe you want to be more expressive, more flexible, more courageous, or simply more peaceful inside. Let yourself imagine this version of you clearly. How does this person speak? How do they move? How do they treat themselves? And how do they show up in the world? You do not need a perfect answer. You just need a feeling, a small sense of direction. As you stay relaxed, bring forward one more important question. Which identity no longer fits your life? Think of it like an old coat that used to keep you warm, but now it is too tight, too heavy, or no longer your style. Maybe the shy one identity no longer fits. Maybe the people-pleaser identity feels too exhausting. Maybe the I am not good enough identity has stayed far longer than it should. When you notice an identity that does not match who you are becoming, you make the first step toward releasing it. You do not need to fight it. You simply recognize that you have outgrown it. Finally, as we close this reflection, imagine one small change you can make today. Not tomorrow, not next month. Today. It could be as simple as speaking one extra sentence in English, saying no to something that drains your energy, or choosing one thought that supports the new version of you. This small action is like planting a seed. It does not look like much in the beginning, but day by day, it grows into something strong and real. Take a slow breath in and a slow breath out. When you are ready, gently open your eyes or return your attention to the world around you. Remember this calm feeling. Remember the new version of yourself. And remember that change often begins with just one small decision. As we come to the end of this episode, I want you to take a slow breath and remember the most important message from today. You are not stuck with the identities you created in the past. The person you used to be does not have to decide the person you will become. Your old stories may have shaped you, but they do not have to limit you. You have the power to choose a new version of yourself, one that feels more honest, more confident, and more connected to the life you want to live. Even small changes can open new doors. Think about everything we explored together today. We talked about how old identities are often created by family, school, culture, and past experiences. We looked at how these identities can stay with us for years, even when they no longer match who we are. We also explored how letting go of old labels can feel uncomfortable at first, but also freeing and full of possibility. And finally, we took a moment to reflect on the identity you want to grow into, the version of yourself that feels more true, more open, and more alive. So, here is your simple challenge. Something small but powerful. Something that will help you turn today's ideas into real action. This week, do one thing your old identity would avoid. Just one thing. If your old identity says, "I am too shy to speak English," try saying one extra sentence. If your old identity says, "I always overthink," try taking one small step without planning everything. If your old identity says, "I must make everyone happy," try saying no once and see how it feels. The action does not need to be big. It only needs to be honest. And after you try it, come back and tell us in the comments. Your small step might inspire someone else. Your courage might help another learner take their first step too. This is how we grow, not alone, but together. Thank you for spending this time with me today on English in Fluency. I hope you leave this episode feeling a little lighter, a little clearer, and a little more open to becoming who you truly are. Remember, you are always allowed to change. You are always allowed to grow. And you are always allowed to write a new story for yourself. Take care, keep practicing, and I will see you in the next episode.